I mean, as the number one China glazer in, I would say, one of the number one China glazers in the Western sphere, as a political commentator. Okay, whatever. Here, let's watch
David,
this.
first of all, thank you. It's nice to see you again.
Good to be here.
Is the premise that the United States did a poor job of managing risk after the fall of the Soviet Union?
Well, we certainly made a lot of false assumptions, bad assumptions.
That doesn't sound
along
like
the way.
No.
Nah, it wouldn't be us. Wouldn't be us. And the fundamental argument of the book is that we believed somehow, we deluded ourselves, John, into believing that China and Russia, each for their own different reasons, would like just sign up to the Western world. That we were going to go say, look, we got this whole thing.
Bro, this is especially funny. They did do that. They did. Both of these countries did that in their own unique ways. Okay? Russia reflects the American chauvinist principles and American imperialist principles, and China absolutely reflects American capitalism. Both of these countries, in very meaningful ways, literally incorporated themselves to Western values, Western identity, made themselves phenomenally important, all things considered, with respect to their own individual material conditions. They made themselves a irreplaceable part of the global market. The notion that, like, these guys did not incorporate themselves in the global marketplace is ridiculous. Fucking DPRK, okay?
Figured out, all you guys do is come in here and sign.
What is this? Bro doesn't know shit about anything. Socialist grifter, debate Norm Finkelstein? Gonna debate on like trans issues?
Right. We're gonna do a rules-based democratic foundation order, and everybody will be cool with it.
And that was supposed to be the end of history, because, right?
I remember the book.
Was over.
Francis Fukuyama said it's the end of history. Western liberalism is triumphant, and we can all just skate on the glorious booty that we get from it.
Right. Now, you can't blame just him, because there were a lot of other people who believed
just him.
Okay. And I signed on to a little bit.
Sorry, triggered law. Sorry, that was my little brother. Dude, that's so funny. A funny sequence of events.
This myself, so I confess. But I got to tell you, this basically went on for 30 years, good 25 anyway, because we were busy doing the wars on terror. You were just talking about those a little while ago.
Well, you talk about, in the book, there's a lot of stories of how George Bush thought that there would be a great rapprochement with Putin over their shared dislike of terrorism. And the two of them, I mean, there's stories in there that come out of James Bond. You're on a yacht with George Bush and Putin, and they've just seen a very dark version of the Nutcracker. You're like, it's not even the regular Nutcracker. It's the dark Nutcracker. And you're like...
I bet Bush really enjoyed that.
I'm sure he loves anything high.
So, so this was 2002. We were in St. Petersburg. We were floating down the Neva River. They're in a great party boat. There's this guy.
Wait, you were floating down the river with them?
I was floating down in the boat behind it. We weren't even.
What are you, like, tubing? They're in a yacht?
That's what White House reporters do, isn't it? No, we were in the pool. It's just this time the pool was a river.
Yeah, when he says terrorism, they're dislike of terrorism, he means dislike of Muslims. Yeah.
All right.
Right. Okay. So, so we're following him down, and there's this guy serving dinner. He's kind of big and hulking. It turns out it's Prigozhin. Okay.
Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the terrible army.
Well, at the time, he was Putin's chef.
Mr. Hot Dog Salesman.
Okay. His only job was make sure the meals were good. And he had a really glowering look.
Wait. So he's like Bobby Flay, and then he turns into the head of a mercenary army.
Well, before he did that, he ran the Internet Research Agency and tried to fix the 2016 election with disinformation.
You know, they really are Renaissance men.
They are.
It really is.
I mean, that's talent.
That's talent.
That's talent.
So now, this appears to be going along until George Bush wants them to go after Islamic terrorism, and then at that point, Putin wants them to go after Chechnya.
Right, or at least Putin wants to use the excuse to go after Chechnya. And that was the beginning of Bush beginning to think, you know, maybe this guy...
By the way, China in Xinjiang, Putin against Chechens, America and its war on terror. Think about the way that one is talked about in the Western world versus the other two. Just like think about how hard we justified one and talk about the other two as though they are the most like immoral thing you could do. Bro, what are you talking about? How is anything I just said confusing? Targets would be Muslim separatists in two, okay, or just regular old Muslims in general, living inside of the domestic boundaries, okay? Justifications for it are literally Islamic terrorism and combating Islamic terrorism. For America, it's, you know, natural resources that they want overseas. One is seen as like a defensive posture, a defense against the global war on terror. The other two are like obviously seen as, you know, deliberate ethnic cleansing campaigns against a Muslim population inside of their own boundaries, inside of their own, you know, national boundaries. I'm talking about the hypocrisy of the way that people analyze these three situations.
Guy isn't the one we thought he was.
He looked into his soul.
Yeah, well, you know, he may have looked at the wrong soul. So in 2007, Putin shows up at this thing called the Munich Security Conference, and he says, you know, there are parts of Russia that have been separated from us that really belong to us, to the Russia that Peter the Great created. And remember, Putin isn't trying to recreate the Soviet Union. He thinks the guys who ran the Soviet Union were idiots.
Right.
You go into his office, he's got a big bust of Peter the Great there. So who do you think he thinks he is?
Prigozhin. No. Yeah. How do we miss all of this? And even if we had been onto it, what would we have done differently?
So first, it was a combination of sort of bad intelligence, wishful thinking. Oh, sure, he's going to be troublesome. But at the end of the day, he cares about his oil exports, his gas exports.
Bro, please stop linking this. What the fuck do you want me to do with this? Yeah. Tensions are easing in New York City. Okay, we'll look at it later. Okay,
More than
let me
he really
finish
cares
this.
about this. And look, up until the weekend before the invasion happened, there's a story
of Crimea.
No, the invasion
of Ukraine.
Okay.
China is treating the Muslims in Xinjiang with the most respect. The only evidence of ill treatment was from Western-backed propagandists. Come on, big dog. I mean, maybe now, but come on. Guys, this isn't just like Adrian Zen's propaganda or whatever. Yes, there was a mass surveillance campaign in re-education, and it was collective punishment upon the entire fucking region. I don't know why this is like so hard to... I don't know why it's so hard to address, or rather, the way that people talk about it when there's a difference between critical support versus unconditional support. And I think a lot of people personally mistake the two and think critical support means like, oh, they need it critically, as in I'm not going to criticize them at all. Okay? Like, that's crazy. I mean, as the number one China glazer in, I would say, one of the number one China glazers in the Western sphere as a political commentator, it's fucking ridiculous to make this assertion that, like, on the one hand, you call the detention facilities for undocumented migrants in the southern border concentration camps, and then simultaneously talk like you're a MAGA guy, but for China when it comes to China. It's crazy. It's so weird. And I'm not like, it's funny because, like, obviously my haters always say I'm a China glazer and say like, oh, there is no ill treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang or whatever. I do personally. Yeah. I mean, I recognize it for what it is. We ain't making it to the tier 1 cities with these takes. Yeah.
In 2022.
So this is all past 2014. This
Yeah,
is all.
yeah, 2014 comes, he takes Crimea. Obama says, I'm not going to war for something that used to belong to.
It's crazy how far Xinjiang has come. It's at the point where USA Today is running propaganda pieces for it, paid by the Chinese finance companies. Discover Xinjiang's resurgent crossroads of trade and tradition. That is amazing. That is actually crazy. Xinjiang, gateway to China's future, where culture meets commerce. Connections by USA Today. That is amazing. Only 2 years prior to this, actually 2 years ago is when the tide shifted, when they closed off the re-education centers and shit, when they decided that it was over, like the separatist movement had been completely fucking squashed. They're out here glazing China harder than I do, man. That's crazy. The Pan-Turkic Empire would treat the Uyghurs so much better than China would. I'm sorry, brother, but like, as a Turkish person myself, it's a little say that, considering that I ain't seen no motherfucking high-speed rail that Turkey is fucking putting down in Uzbekistan or whatever, okay? I do, however, see China building high-speed rail everywhere, including in fucking Laos and shit. That's crazy. How much high-speed rail has Turkey fucking developed in these Turkic nations? Give me a break.
Nobody does sanctions for a year, right? And then next year, the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, signs the Nord Stream 2 agreement. It creates this pipeline that runs from Russia around Ukraine, so it doesn't get any revenue from it, and straight into Europe. And she says, you know, Putin's a reliable supplier.
He's realistic.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Reasonable assumption, maybe, because he really hadn't cut off gas supplies. So what happens next? 7 years later, he goes.
So that, for the record, is actually the good shit that Russia was doing in terms of playing ball, in terms of, having trade relations with the EU, with Europe in general, because that's the inverse of like doing what the fuck they're doing in Ukraine. However, that was not something that America was fond of. It's not like the United States of America was like, oh, it's great. Like Putin is playing ball. Like the way he's representing this makes it seem like America was sitting there and going, wow, how wonderful. It doesn't seem like Vladdy Poo is going to go do violent sicko mode shit in any other country. Like, that's crazy. No, they fucking absolutely despise that, okay? Oil pipeline is good, HasanAbi. Yes, when we're talking about like whether a country should be doing trade or if a country should be doing war, yes, I do think that oil pipeline is good in that situation. It's significantly better than what? Ad? Oh my God, that is lame as fuck, bro. That's not even a bait. He said ad. Oh my Lord. Okay, fuck it. Sure. You're desperate. You're desperate, but it's fine. Chat is desperate for a fucking chatter bait. Chat is so desperate. That's weak as fuck, bro. Get the hell out of here. I mean, it doesn't matter. At the top of the hour, there's still a 3-minute ad break. And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe regardless for $5 or for free with Twitch Prime. Yeah, I got cooked. Sure. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free. You can get gifted a sub if you're lucky as well. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. I got fucking weak nutted. I got the weakest of nuts, the weakest of baits. Ridiculous. Gross. Living within China, Xinjiang is a really weird issue. People from Xinjiang are very adamant that it's fine there. They invite me to the region all the time like it's nothing, even though I'm US. But it's easy to see how people would get lost in the sauce when it's people from there who are the most adamant nothing happened. Is strange. I think that, like, if I'm being as charitable as physically possible, I think that China doesn't want Xinjiang to separate from China, both as a consequence of its natural resources and also just like it's a massive part of what is now considered mainland China. So they took a lot of fucking initiative there, and they handled that shit in very, very in completely unacceptable by Western standards ways. And by that I mean, like, you know, they didn't do like American invasion of Afghanistan shit, but they absolutely had and still have mass surveillance round the clock and re-education camps. So much so that they, you know, like they did residential school shit, but on steroids, under the auspices of dealing with Islamic terror and separatist terror. But the one thing that China does do, I think, that other countries don't really do as much, is that they do legitimately, while they were doing that, they were also working on developing the area as well. So a couple generations in, and all of a sudden, people start having different opinions, and the assimilation is complete. There's two ways of dealing with it. You either, I guess, like kind of Hanify or neuter. You neuter any kind of like separatist movement, anything like that, and then continue developing it. Continue developing the area, and then people are like, okay, we're chill now. In a lot of instances, at least historically, because America did its version of that by directly ethnically cleansing the indigenous population and then putting them into residential schools, and then, you know, doing the kidnapping and like turning natives into white people like they did in Canada. They didn't have to like work hard on redeveloping and reintegrating those tribal areas back into the rest of the American economy, the rest of the American society, which is why you have still so many open wounds when it comes to native issues, so much poverty, so many diseases of despair. That's one way of dealing with it.
Goes after full-on Ukraine. The U.S. reveals the intelligence starting in the late fall. They get this remarkable intelligence. Mm-hmm. They send Bill Burns, the CIA director who used to be ambassador to Russia, to say this would be a really bad idea. Putin says, "Oh, I'm not doing anything." And the weekend before, everybody's back in Munich, and there are a bunch of Europeans saying to me and everybody else, "Oh, he's not really going to invade. He's just bluffing. He wouldn't risk his oil revenues." 4 days later, he invades. I mean, the intelligence chief for Germany was in Kyiv the morning of the invasion. They had to.
That's crazy that so many people who are very knowledgeable on the issue seemingly had the exact same take that I did. Perhaps we can have. Perhaps we can go back and look at the matter with a fresher perspective now. Hasan sharing his L. I'm just saying, dude, it's fucking absolutely vindicated. I feel vindicated.
To evacuate him because he didn't believe they would invade.
So what did he think that noise was?
He got out of town kind of fast.
So this is all hindsight, though. In truth, what could we when someone is imperialistic in that way, what can other powers do short of an actual shooting war to prevent these kinds of things. There's no guarantee that tougher sanctions after Crimea would have deterred him. It sounds like this is kind of his destiny, and he's fulfilling that destiny come hell or high water.
So that's the other piece of this, which is we impose our values on Russia, China, and we think, well, we're not going to do something that would get in the way of our economic interests. Neither would they. So China's a really interesting example. Xi Jinping comes in more than 10 years ago. Joe Biden spent a lot of time with him, traveled around with him. But the intelligence reports about Xi are, this guy's not going to challenge the West. He's going to tend to his economy, make sure all is good, right? We now discover, and you read about in the book, there are these secret speeches that he gave almost as soon as he came into office saying, we're going to build up our nuclear forces to the size of the Russian.
Dude, that's such a funny fucking take. That's not challenging the West, big dog. This is the problem. Like, people think nuclear proliferation occurs in foreign nations as a direct consequence of, like, wanting to challenge the West. No, Xi Jinping, now I'm back on the fucking China dick riding train, okay? Xi Jinping literally came to the United States of America a couple months ago, if you guys remember. When he was in San Francisco, he had a conversation with Joe Biden. In that conversation, he straight up said, we do not want to do nuclear proliferation. You have forced our hand to do nuclear proliferation. We will actually engage in denuclearization if you remove some of these fucking bases from Japan and the surrounding island nations from the South China Sea. That's it. That was the major reason. That was the major reason as to why these guys engaged in nuclear proliferation. It's a perfectly understandable development for a nation state that is being threatened by American hegemonic power in their own fucking backyard. Nuclear deterrence in mainland China is somehow a fucking threat against the West. Is such a cynical view from the West. Exactly. But do you believe China, though? Yes, I do. I do believe China. I do. Because I have an opinion that most state actors, and maybe sometimes, like in the case of Russia, this might lead me down a false prediction, okay? But they're rational actors nonetheless. It is not going to change my analysis on looking at countries as like, and the leadership of countries as rational actors with motivations that are quite similar to our motivations.
Russians and the Americans. We're going to make sure that we take our claims in the South China Sea. I was out on the in the Rose Garden of the White House when Xi came to visit and promised everybody he wasn't going to militarize these islands they're building in the South China Sea.
Yeah,
a
he's
year or
talking
two
about it
later,
now.
you look on satellite photographs, there are fighter jets showing up on the islands. Kind of looks like militarization.
Well, that's just...
Okay, like, why? The question is, why? Also, once again, it's their fucking backyard, brother. It is their backyard. Why are our weapons directed at China? And why should, given the history of the United States of America, why should any fucking global power not feel threatened when American missiles are aimed at them? We have demonstrated our interest in using everything, including nukes, on civilian territory. We are the only nation that has done so. Why the fuck would any other country not be afraid of that prospect? It is ridiculous. Why does the U.S. get to sail warships off the coast of the Chinese coast and when they have known to fake incidents? No, I just don't understand how, like, this is in the most, like, simplistic, in the most, like, playground bully terms. This literally is like having a big old bully beat the shit out of people consistently and then come up to you and start, like, fake punching you, okay? And then if you go and start fight training, the bully goes, why are you training? I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm just fake punching you. It's like, bitch, I saw you punch the shit out of every other nerd that looks like me. Why would I expect you not to punch me? You keep saying you're going to punch my face. Don't defend yourself. Don't defend yourself. It literally is, yeah, how about you don't put your countries close to U.S. bases? Have you thought about that? That is unironically American foreign policy. That literally is American foreign policy. We have military bases all around the planet. Why are you arming up against, why are you existing so close? Why are you existing so close to one of our military bases? And then people go, aren't we just defending our allies, though? Which is great. That is the American way of justifying this, right? And it's like every single one of these countries at a certain point has been like, hey, man, maybe we shouldn't let America build military bases here. And then those guys get fucking slaughtered. Suspiciously, they get packed up. So, of course, what remains of these nations' leadership are perfectly in line with American interests. So then we can just maintain this assumption like that everybody loves this. Everybody wants it because everybody now does want it. Because the ones that didn't want it are gone.
Convenience.
Yeah,
It's not.
right.
Are we lying to them?
Did we pack up South Korea? Great question. South Korea is a great question. A fucking brutal military dictatorship that slaughtered everyone from rugged commies down to like, you know, people who were interested in like civil liberties for years and years and years. Okay? A country that seemingly changed from a military dictatorship to 6 families. I mean, not even 6. 6 is being fucking super charitable, to like 2 families in a trench coat. They mass killed hundreds of thousands of leftists in South Korea, and it was a military dictatorship until until the end of the 80s. And beyond that, this is before we talk about like North Korea, which, by the way, this designation was just completely fucking created by other superpowers. You know what I mean? North Korea, South Korea. It was Korea. Okay. And we did absolutely, in my opinion, a genocide in North Korea. Just straight up. 80% of the fucking infrastructure just reduced to rubble. It's crazy. We drew a line on a fucking
economy, make sure all is good, right? We now discover, and you read about in the book, there are these secret speeches that he gave almost as soon as he came into office saying, we're going to build up our nuclear forces to the size of the Russians and the Americans. We're going to make sure that we take our claims in the South China Sea. I was out on the in the Rose Garden of the White House when Xi came to visit and promised everybody he wasn't going to militarize these islands they're building in the South China Sea.
This is also, God, I keep pausing at the same point, but like, it is pretty funny to say, like, I can't believe China lied to us about this when, like, the American policy on on China and Taiwan has always been strategic ambiguity, which to the layman just means lying. Saying that, like, there's only one China, okay, and Taiwan is Chinese Taipei, publicly declaring that over and over again, reasserting that over and over again, and then simultaneously fucking beefing up Taiwan's defenses with the hopes that inevitably, you know, you'll defend yourself. Taiwan will defend itself from China.
A year or two later, you look on satellite photographs, there are fighter jets showing up on the islands. Kind of looks like military.
Well, that's just convenience.
Yeah,
That's not.
right.
Are we lying to them, or are we lying to ourselves?
I think more to ourselves. So, you know, we did not want to conceive of a world in which we were back in superpower conflict. We wanted to live in the world in which the U.S. was the...
It's literally this exact U.S. foreign policy take as always. Same take from a year ago.
Wait, what? The whole square? No, the line.
I don't know if this is where it ends. I think it does. I think Taiwanese airspace technically is Chinese landmass too.
And the Taiwanese fucking breathe a lot.
They're
sucking in all that air from mainland China.
CNN reporter, why is this Chinese
two-seater that they say is armed with air-to-air missiles, and it's been shadowing this U.S. Navy plane now for about 15 minutes. It is pretty remarkable to see this Chinese warplane operating at such close proximity, several hundred feet away.
It is interesting that China got so close to our plane.
Yeah, what the fuck?
The
Why
country
are you
just like moved towards where we were
it's
flying.
literally is like the why are you hitting yourself, but on a global scale. It's like, dude, what is your plane doing there? You know what I mean?
Wait, what? The whole
I can't believe there's a Chinese warplane so close to China. What the fuck? Someone needs to look at this. Someone needs to look into this.
The predominant power. We finally calmed down the Middle East. We're doing real well with that. And that we could go and focus on competing, some containment of Russia. And, you know, Biden happened to be the one sitting in office when this all fell apart. And most of the book is a story of what happens when that fell apart. It's the story of how the Zaporizhia nuclear plant in Ukraine, the biggest nuclear plant in Europe, suddenly everybody's afraid is going to become the world's biggest
Chernobyl
dirty bomb.
Yes,
yeah, right. And there's an amazing story right from New York City 2 years ago, October of 2022, when President Biden shows up at a fundraiser at James Murdoch's house. They're nice New Yorkers.
Not familiar with the last name, but go ahead.
Yeah. He's actually sort of the black sheep.
Do you think Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea are too far gone to ever become socialist? Bro, what are we talking about? Like, it's like saying, is America too far gone to ever become socialist? The answer is yes. Their current governance relies on them never being socialist. Yeah, it's the same shit everywhere. It's the same shit that, like, anywhere where there is the anywhere where America's sphere of influence touches is way too far gone. It's the same exact situation here.
Sheep of the family.
No, I
He's the
understand
Democrat who raises money for Biden, among others. So they're, you know, nice New Yorkers walking around with their wine, looking at his art collection. The president comes in and says, by the way, we're going through something that is the closest to nuclear war we've had since the Cuban Missile Crisis. They're all looking at each other like...
He drops that at a cocktail party?
I'm sure they all thought that it was really the moment to get out to the Hamptons, don't you think?
He drops that and then it's like, do you guys have brie?
I
Like,
gotta
what?
pee.
He does actually. People in the White House were amazed. They now call it his Armageddon speech because he had just said the same thing in the Oval Office.
Right. Then did he turn to everybody and go, and my word is don't. That's his big thing now. He tells dictators, don't.
Don't.
And they're like, ooh, okay. Haven't we sowed the seeds of this with our own arrogance and cavalier approach to a lot of these foreign policy conflicts? We always frame things as this is a battle between democracy and the free world and liberation and authoritarianism. But the truth is, we're fighting for trade channels and resources. Like, this is all a function of competing capitalist powers. And aren't we the ones? I mean, we've invaded more countries than Russia and China combined. So how do we give ourselves somehow the pass as the white hat guys when a lot of our policy has created a lot of the chaos that they're taking advantage of? I'm done. I'm out of here.
So there's been a lot of that going on in American history for a long time. Teddy Roosevelt, you know.
What did I miss?
Approach to a lot of the don't. That's his big thing now. He tells dictators, don't.
Don't.
And they're like, ooh,
Okay.
Haven't we sowed the seeds of this with our own arrogance and cavalier approach to a lot of these foreign policy conflicts? We always frame things as this is a battle between democracy and the free world and liberation and authoritarianism. But the truth is, we're fighting for trade channels and resources. Like, this is all a function of competing capitalist powers. And aren't we the ones? I mean, we've invaded more countries than Russia and China combined. So how do we give ourselves somehow the pass as the white hat guys when a lot of our policy has created a lot of the chaos that they're taking advantage of? I'm done. I'm out of here.
So there's been a lot of that going on in American history for a long time. Teddy Roosevelt, took over his fair share of territory. But I think in the Biden administration, we've had to sort of face these contradictions because at the beginning of the administration, the president was...
Did we face these contradictions? I don't know. We face it in the worst way possible.
Saying just what you said. This is a battle between democracy and autocracy. And everyone says, okay, that's pretty clean. Then he goes to...
Just not true.
Yeah, then he goes to Saudi Arabia, does the fist bump with MBS, right? And I was on that trip. They weren't quite sure how that was.
Are you ever home?
No. When you cover the White House, you got to go where the president goes as part of the job. And then... we move on to what's been happening in Israel and the Israel-Hamas war. And as you said earlier, we are in the very odd position of both providing aid and providing the arms that are being dropped on Gaza. And I think this administration has had the hardest time trying to go right that, and obviously is causing a lot of pain, not only for Gazans,
They haven't, though, but they haven't. We have not. We have not tried to right those wrongs at all. There's not even an attempt to try to right those wrongs. If you nod your head when Jon Stewart says, well, isn't this just like America literally doing global war for trade routes and natural resources, which is correct. And then he nods his head along with that and then goes, well, the Biden administration has tried to grapple with that. It's like, well, but they haven't. They are just continuing the exact same thing. You can't on the one hand say like, well, we try to write this this neat little story. We're fighting autocracy around the world, and we're not really doing that. While simultaneously acting like Biden is doing that, then you just basically fucking destroyed your own point.
But for people in the administration who are having a hard time living with it.
Would it simplify our position if we stopped pretending our morals were beyond the reproach of all these other countries? Would it help us to not have to scold everybody for failing to live up to...
No, because that's an important part of the protection racket. Okay? That's why you call it a protection racket, right? Protection. Like there has to be a global evil that you are defending against. There has to be a villain in the story, and you're the good guys. You have to consistently reaffirm the position that you are the good guys, and you're doing this for good reason. If you give the game away, all of a sudden more people are going to be like, well, I don't know. Do we have to do this shit?
Principles that we very clearly do not uphold.
Well, at least we have some principles, okay? That's the one thing that
we
to
say
be said.
that,
Do we?
but, you can't invade a country. What happened in Iraq?
That's right.
You can't call for regime change. What did we do in Libya? Every time we say these things, we undercut our own position with, for God's sakes, Iran is an enemy today because we overthrew their democratically elected government in 1953.
That's right.
So at what point do we just admit that this is how we're behaving?
The odd thing is, at the moment that presidents do admit that, they get chewed up for admitting to American error. Obama went and apologized to the Iranians.
I'm not saying apologize. I'm just saying, take off.
Damn, dude. Damn. No way, bro. Did Obama apologize? That's crazy. Here's a former U.S. ambassador admitting that we don't oppose China for any reason, but we want to be more powerful. What is this?
States must make sure that we do not have a peer competitor for our security. Think about what this means. This is a brutalist philosophy. The proposition is that even if China were to change in some of the ways that proponents of engagement have been said that we hope it changes, even if they just, as a thought experiment, adapted our Constitution and our laws wholesale, we should still try to limit their growth merely because we shouldn't have a peer competitor. That is the proposition, regardless of beliefs, regardless of people striving for human flourishing along the lines that we have been prescribing to the world for decades. If they actually appear to be succeeding, regardless of their beliefs, we must stop them, even if it means pushing them back toward poverty. Have I misunderstood the proposition?
I don't mean this question cynically or sarcastically, but what's wrong with that?
Oh my God, I kind of want to watch that now. I mean, yeah, that is true. Guys, come on. Why do we have so many fucking significant tariffs, for example? Why is the Trump position on tariffs now identical to the fucking identical to the Biden position on tariffs, or the Biden position on tariffs now is identical to the Trump position on tariffs against China? Why do you have the EU talking about how like China is anti-competitive? Why? Because they're fucking subsidizing their entire EV industry, and their EVs are infinitely cheaper and similar quality to the American and Western EVs, and it's making it impossible to sell fucking Western EVs, electric vehicles. It's just, that is from IQ2. It's one of those like debate shows. I've never seen this before, but so ultimately, why are they doing that? Well, because everybody at the end of the day is interested in profit margins, in continuing the profit margins of their own companies, of their own capitalists. That's it. And I think China has in fact drastically reduced subsidies on EVs. They put in a lot of effort to build up the industry, as do we, but they did it earlier and now is standing well on its own. Yeah. But you get what I'm like, you get the problem here, right? I mean, Fango, you're a EV evangelist. Like, that's not being done because there's like a national security risk. Although they will claim that, right? They will claim that. They will say, oh, we can't have Chinese phones, for example. Like, we can't have Huawei or Chinese tech in this country, and they'll reframe it in a national security concern. TikTok is another great example of this. TikTok is a national security risk. If only it was sold off. If only ByteDance divested and sold this company that is massive globally, massively successful globally in the social media space. If only they divested and sold it to an American. That's crazy. That's anti-competitive. It is not capitalism at all, right? Because nationalism is a higher interest at the end of the day for a lot of people. They want national capitalism. They don't really want global capitalism, unless you can use global capitalism as a way to continue manufacturing overseas at places where the labor force is easily, like, hyper exploitable. You can enslave the global south, and then you can do global capitalism. But if the global south ends up improving their material conditions, like, for example, what happened in China, if it happened everywhere else, then holy shit, then all of a sudden, you know, we got to fix that. We got to change that. We got to look for new markets that we can exploit, and the markets that have developed themselves to a degree where they become competitive and start, you know, putting out their own competitive products. Like, we don't want that. We don't want that at all. And selling that, you know, in an effort to sell that, you're going to do whatever you can to sell that idea. You're going to do whatever the fuck you can. Yeah, Yellen says China's rapid build out of its green energy industry distorts global prices. Hurts American firms and workers, as well as firms and workers around the world. Yellen, who's planning her second trip to China as Treasury Secretary, said Wednesday. This was back on March 27th. She will convey her belief to her Chinese counterparts that Beijing's increased production of green energy also poses a risk to productivity and growth in the Chinese economy. I will press my Chinese counterparts to take necessary steps to address this issue. We don't like it. Competition? Nope, not like that. China is a dominant player in the batteries for EVs and is a rapidly expanding auto industry that will challenge the world's established car makers as it goes global. The International Energy Agency, a Paris-based intergovernmental group, notes that in 2023, China accounted for around 60% of global electric car sales. Yellen delivered remarks Wednesday afternoon at Suniva, a solar cell manufacturing facility in Norcross, Georgia. The plant closed in 2017 in large part due to cheap imports flooding the market, according to the Treasury. It is reopening in part because of the incentives provided by the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act, which provides tax incentives for green energy manufacturing. Firm's history is something of a warning of the impact of oversaturation of markets by Chinese products and a marker of the state of the U.S.-China economic relations. So to what extent are those car and solar companies subsidized? Because my dad keeps saying, well, yeah, they subsidize everything. That's not fair competition. What do you mean that's not fair competition? We subsidize everything. Subsidize more then. Perhaps if we didn't have some massive interest in only beefing up one industry, the industry of war, we could maybe hyper-focus on other industries that we already subsidize. Which we already do subsidize, by the way. We just cannot compete with Chinese manufacturing at the end of the day. We're mad because we subsidize our industries, and then because of the way that capitalism operates, where does that money go? That money doesn't go to innovation. That money doesn't usually go to R&D. That money doesn't go to like fucking finding better, more efficient ways of manufacturing. That money goes back directly to fucking manipulating the stock market through stock buybacks. So what the fuck are we supposed to do? It's just the major difference is that China, if you were to do such a thing like that, and there is still corruption in the Chinese market as well. Don't make the mistake of thinking that it's like good across the board and completely uncorrupted. But if it gets to a certain degree of corruption the government foresees as a problem, they fucking deal with it. We, on the other hand, never do. And that's a major difference. We never ask for a return on the investments that we make to these American corporations. Chinese government does. Just saying right now, Westerners are saying China's being unfair about EVs, but it's silly because we also subsidize them, and we also spent so long saying China isn't doing enough on climate, and now we say China's doing too much on climate. It's silly. Their EVs are good, and they deserve success because they put in the effort. Gotta watch Tesla shareholder meeting, so refer to Mega for further EV stuff. Lol. Yeah, look at this shit, dude. Look at this shit. And then we just sit there and cry. This is bad domestically, and it's bad as far as like global competition, but no one wants to fucking have that conversation. It's like it's not even a question. Stock buybacks are perfectly valid and permissible, you know, post Reagan, but still, it was illegal before Reagan. Now it's not illegal, but it's perfectly valid and permissible. Okay, keep fucking yourself over then. This is the major difference. We say China is authoritarian, and certainly when it comes to certain civil liberties, they are. Okay. It might be a holdout of like prior fears that were more valid back in the day in terms of like American influence, American interference, espionage, yada, yada, yada. But ultimately, they are a functioning government. We are not, unless you consider our government's function to be improving the profit margins of shareholders, in which case we're a phenomenally well-oiled machine, a phenomenally well-functioning government. That's why these like free market capitalists are so funny when they talk about like free market capitalism. I'm a neoliberal. I believe in free markets. Well, I mean, I guess technically neoliberals are honest because neoliberalism implies that government interference can happen as long as it's in the direction of creating more competition and privatizing everything. We are literally cooking ourselves over and over again and then complaining that like more competent governance occurs elsewhere. And that's very frustrating to us. And we got to do anything. We got to do something about it. Well, the only thing that we can do is just more war.
Take off the mask and go, you know what this is? It strikes me as it's colonialism and imperialism in a more modern form. China is in Africa trying to extract. Right. We're trying to extract. We're militarizing economic rivalries and creating all kinds of chaos and death. over what is ostensibly trying to get better deals.
Well, some of it's better deals. Some of it is protecting technology. And I argue in here that with China, as opposed to Russia, this is, first of all, this is an incredible competitor. And it's a competitor in the military sphere, in the technology sphere, in finance, in economic.
And we're their best customer.
Why do we need to pretend that the Chinese prosperity and their supposed lack of civil liberties are unrelated? I don't think they could have seen nearly the same level of success without suppressing dissent. I don't agree with that. I think the suppression of dissent. I think the suppression of dissent specifically comes from being hyper protectionist, like wanting to protect the integrity of the government from outside influence to the best of your ability. That's why you see it. Like, unless you legitimately think that, like, you know, letting people be gay openly is somehow going to cripple the moral fabric of society, we are talking about two different things. Okay? What the fuck are these LGBTQ kappas flying on screen? What the fuck was that? How did that happen? That's crazy. Anyway, like, I am not a conservative, chatter. What is happening? Is this a new thing? Oh, it's a bit reward. Oh, okay. Anyway,
and they are ours.
Right.
And that's really what makes this different from the old Cold War. There's a reason there's new in new Cold Wars, and there's a reason there's an S at the end. First of all, we're fighting two simultaneously. Okay. The old Cold War, that wasn't the case.
Is fighting the wrong terminology, because isn't that, look, the only people that never lose a war are the military-industrial complex, are the people that sell the weapons. And if we continue to, if we continue to push that, you know, weaponization of these economic rivalries, aren't we just playing into that cycle?
Playing into the cycle, but if you're in a world in which vacuums happen, if we say, okay, we're done with this, you're going to go back and build our big walls and sort of recede from it, someone fills that space. And that space is going to get filled largely by China, some by Russia, some by other authoritarian regimes. And so we've got to make a really hard and bad choice, which is, do we want to be the one trying to fill that void with our technology and our principles, understanding that we violate them all the time?
Bro, what are you saying? There's functionally no difference then. Our principles are not, if you're only using it as a way to market your actions. You are openly recognizing that we use our supposed principles as a marketing technique. What the fuck do you mean? I don't understand how this person can contradict themselves so obviously in the same fucking conversation. Are we listening? Is he hearing his own words?
Or do we want to let an authoritarian regime go fill that space, which we know how that's going to look?
It seems like what we should do is be honest about what our aims are, in the way that China went into Africa and did Belt and Road, knowing that really it's about cobalt and lithium. And rather than...
Yeah, one should ask why Belt and Road has seen so much success that it caused American economists to reconsider the debt traps that we had engaged in. Like, you got Foreign Policy magazine literally being like, the Chinese debt trap was a myth. We were wrong about it, and we should really reconsider the way that we have operated the World Bank and the IMF. It's crazy. Like, you got Bloomberg saying that shit. It's nuts.
And us going into Africa and just building up all these small military juntas that end up creating all those dictatorships that create so much chaos and pain for those countries.
Well, I'd argue that now we're not doing it with cobalt, we're doing it with semiconductors, right? So the big story that we tell in here, went to Taiwan, spent a lot of time at Taiwan Semiconductor, which is the biggest producer of the most advanced semiconductors in the world. And, you know, looked at the question, does that create a silicon shield for the United States and for Taiwan? In other words, that the Chinese would not dare take over Taiwan because they would lose access to Taiwan Semiconductor.
When are we going to learn any sentence that begins with, would they dare? Yes, they would dare, and so would we.
And yeah, bro, China is going to invade Taiwan.
So my argument here is it's a silicon shield for a little while, John, but eventually the Chinese are going to learn how to make everything Taiwan Semiconductor is making, and at that moment, we've got a real Taiwan crisis. And so the book is sort of a warning ahead to what these next 20 or 30 years are going to look like. Because this is not a world in which these new Cold Wars are going to end sometime soon. They are going to be the dominant theme of the next 20, 30, 40 years, long after Putin and Xi are gone, and long after Joe Biden and Donald Trump are gone.
I don't believe that last part.
That Trump's never leaving?
I think the two of them, honestly, it'll be like 2084. And they'll be like, it's another Biden-Trump rematch. I can't believe it. Two heads in a jar.
Yeah, I mean, they're having like a serious conversation. Jon Stewart has a couple moments where he like pops off talking about imperialism and if there's a better alternative out there. David Sanger turns around and literally says, actually, yes, America does lie about its like, rule-based international order quite a bit, but the alternative is much worse. It's authoritarian, scary alternatives. So we just got to kind of keep lying about it, and we got to keep doing what we've been doing. What the fuck's the point then? And then Jon Stewart ends it with like a couple jokes to like basically neutralize the conversation. All the decisions China makes are about silicon and cobalt, and all the decisions we make are about values and democracy. Yeah.
New Cold Wars.
I mean, it's relatively reductive, but it is kind of interesting to see how frequently the dominant power always says they will do to us what we have done to them if we lose our grip of power. History is riddled with dominating forces consistently making this argument. Okay? Speaking of one of the major countries that love talking about how they will do to us what we've done to them if we lose our grip of power, if we stop the violence,